So, hello everybody. Today is going to be a short space on one of the major developments that has been hailed as, around the corner for almost a month now, which is the complete collapse of the South Donetsk front, of which Ugledar is just a symptom. Everybody, and including me, we are trolling pretty hard the Ukrainians over Ugledar, but Ugledar is just a symptom, and in a certain sense, it's also a testament of a failure. That's why I think that Ugledar should be salted after it's captured, and some funny things might be done just to remind people how bad things can turn when you're not planning properly, and when you are a bit too self-deluded over the capabilities and the risks ahead. So, as you may have already noticed, since yesterday, Deep State, but not only Deep State, have marked Ugledar as being on a practical kettle, practical boiler. Ukrainian forces have also shown a COP video, showing the destruction in Ugledar and how Ugledar was before the war. This is a typical thing that Ukrainians love doing when they're losing their coping, and it's usually either they make like a huge breakup of everything that they've done, so everything that have destroyed, people that have killed, a lot of gore, or they make these where they show that how bad the evil Ruski was, and how the Ruski mir completely destroys whatever it touches. I mean, the usual shtick, the usual propaganda. However, Ugledar, as I said, is just a symptom of a deeper problem for Ukrainians. And in a certain sense, I had already made a small thread about why the two arsenals that got attacked, three if you want, because you got two in Tver and one in Krasnodar, but basically it's two main arsenals and then one smaller, which is like a second extension of the first one, the one at Tver. Anyway, so that attack right now is being linked as a Hail Mary to stop the Russians from advancing. In case you haven't read the bullshit that is circulating, especially the Estonian Ministry of Defense says that 30,000 tons of ammo and explosives have been taken out, and we will see the results of that and the consequences of that within the next couple of weeks. If you have read my small thread about it, you know that immediately I surmised a couple of things. It's very possible that the Russians were stupid enough to have just 2 or 3 months worth of strategic reserve while they are busy having a large war next door. But at the same time, it also shows how desperate the Western Ministries of Defense are about the situation, because they are literally saying something which would be perfectly logical for countries like Estonia, countries like Germany. As you guys may remember, in 2022, in October 2022, there was a audit of the German artillery reserves, and it was found that for certain ammunition types, they had barely 20,000 pieces, in total about 100,000 pieces of 155 millimeters, and generally speaking, the inventory for all things ammunition was extremely low and wouldn't allow them to operate in a current logic for more than 45 to 60 days. Same thing for the French, by the way. The operational module is 60 days. Deployment is between 30 and 60 days, and then they are supposed to function for another 60 days without needing a production influx and so on. The Brits have the same problem. I posted last year actually to prove how bad the situation was everywhere. The Brits had in mind a very low artillery component, roughly 48 barrels. 48 barrels, 155, of course. They had lighter artillery as well. And those 48 barrels were supposed to have roughly 60,000 ammunition rounds ready to go in order to quote-unquote fight, which was absolutely unsustainable given the target of roughly 300,000 that they should have had as stock for whatever form of warfare. But when it comes to Germany, France, and the UK, we need to also understand that they have really small militaries compared to their GDP, but also to their population. The UK is an extremely reduced format for military. France isn't better, Germany neither. But when it comes to how these people were looking at war, a lot of Euro NATO members are literally stuck into a mop-up operation because the logic is everybody puts everything together and all this makes enough ammunition for NATO to sustain itself and face an adversary like Russia. And the logic there is the same because, like you are France, why the fuck do you want to have 3-4 million rounds? It's a burden, it's a huge cost to maintain also the production capacity, but also you are France, you are Germany. Germany is a bit more complicated because they are still close to the front line, they just have Poland as a buffer. But for France, for instance, you got Germany as a buffer, you got Austria, you got all the Central European states, which makes it like very complicated for you to see the war come straight ahead unless there is a complete collapse of the front line. Generally speaking, though, as I said, the logic was there. Nobody needs millions of rounds for countries like Germany, England, or France, because everything was supposed to be pulled together. Now, why I'm saying this is because at the same time, the group thinking from countries like the Trizo-Baltics, the Chihuahuas, or France, or Germany, or the UK, do not apply to Russia. Russia doctrinally is an artillery army masquerading as a tank army. So basically, they needed to have millions of rounds ready. And this is the exact case we're seeing here. If the Russians need to maintain the course of this war, they cannot be at 2 or 3 months worth of ammunition. So, given this background information, the only thing that we can hope for the Ukrainians with the destruction of these arsenals is that forces the Russians somehow to ration all over the front or to focus on specific directions, which would make the task for the Ukrainians easier, because then they will see that Russia will focus on Pokrovsk, will focus on southern Donetsk, will focus on Zaporozhye, but will not do what they're doing right now, which is literally breaking the Ukrainians at the seams. They're attacking the Zherebets area, they're attacking in the Kupiansk area, they're attacking up to the Klishivka area, Chastov Yar, they are in Toretsk, they took over New York. They are also pushing timidly towards Siversk. Pokrovsk, of course, you know it already. Kurakovo, Ugledar, and they also restarted a small push around the Velika Novosilka salient, which makes it extremely large as an effort. As I said, they stopped this for about 3 to 4 months. They would do these attacks in sequences, but they would not be attacking every day, every time. They had specific areas, for instance, Krasnogorivka for a long time was a focal point, which allowed the Pokrovsk axis to pass a little bit unseen, And then once Krasnoyarsk fell, then you have the situation that we have right now, south of the Pokrovsk axis, when this huge gap, a huge cauldron, is being sealed slowly, and the Ukrainians have already fled from that area just between Krasnoyarsk and the general Pokrovsk salient, which would be the Zelane Perche, Zelane Dro, and so on. So, the best that the Ukrainians can think, if that's it, so if those are the targets they've struck, these 2.5 arsenals, we go back to the exact same situation we had with the refineries. The refineries were attacked massively for 3-4 months, and then suddenly they stopped. Why? Because there wasn't much more damage they could do. They are still trying. They attacked 2 fuel depots in the Kazakh port in Rostov, just next to the Tuzla area around the bridge. Probably they burnt 3 to 4 tanks of fuel once again. But generally speaking, as I was saying, it seems that Ukrainians can do something. They accumulate enough drones for a certain moment. They unleash these waves of attacks, and then suddenly these waves stop. They could be political. It could be the Americans said, just like, stop your shit show, or it could be something completely different, which, as I said, is just the attempt to make these attacks the contrary of what the attacks were last year, when we had these Mugin and homemade long-range attack drones with a rather small payload, which would fly for also 400-600 kilometers, but would be merely mosquito bites. The few attacks we've seen right now are starting to be a little bit more expensive for us, especially the 2 last arsenals. However, we have still the same problem. If there is no follow-up on this, if there is no multiple ways that would go to, start denting the Russian storages, then, okay, it was a good shot, good game. Very fine. 14,000 tons gone. Okay. But the problem is that the rest is still there, and the Russian logistic capability, which once again was much maligned since the beginning of this war, would prove itself once again being an absolute behemoth, a retarded one, but still an absolute behemoth. Now, let's pick the worst situation, that indeed the Russians for some reason would have to scale down the operations for a couple of weeks. The difference is that there you got the inertia carrying you. So basically, in this case, inertia means the localized stocks that you already have amassed for the planned offensive. Usually it's between 1 and 4 weeks per area. And as I said, if the push comes to shove, Russians could, as I said, stop with a couple of directions. Probably they would stop with the Zhelebets area. They would also leave the Chastov Yar area dormant. And then they would transfer everything to the Pokrovsk and Ugledar direction, because there is where the money actually can be made. Money in this case is great advantage when it comes to the advance. Probably, if everything goes fine in the Ugledar area, we're going to see at least 400 square kilometers lost in the next 3 to 4 weeks. In the Pokrovsk area, with the complete sealing of the northern Krasnoyarsk salient and the reach of Zoryane by the Russian forces coming from the east, then you're going to have a huge bunch of shit going on for Kurakovo, and if Kurakovo falls, then you have the straight line Ugledar, Kurakovo, Pokrovsk. Once that is done, you have a superb highway coming from Donetsk straight to the front line that is going to basically, even if in the worst case scenario, it's going to alleviate a lot of the problems that might happen if the strike is all that the Western press and Western officials make it to be. If not, the lining up of the front the use of the E50, but also the adjacent highways, is just going to make it look like nothing happened. Because until now, the Russians were forced to go by small roads, use the E50 for a while, but then they were supposed to spread up in order to ensure their assaults. I already shown this. Once the E50 goes straight to the door of Pokrovsk, so it bypasses Selidovo is taken, then they can play this absolutely awful game for the Ukrainians right now, which is Russians have more or less, when it comes to Pokrovsk, once again, once the front line completely lines up, which means over 60 kilometers around Pokrovsk, Russians would have 7 gates how to access Pokrovsk, which means that the defenders on the Ukrainian side would have to cover more axes of approach than they had for Ugledar and for Avdiivka taken together. Key of this, of course, is Mirnograd. Right now, the Russians, having taken Krasnyar and Krutnyar, are roughly 2.5 kilometers from the southern outskirts of Mirnograd. And if Mirnograd and Moskovsk are already occupied and entered, then Pokrovsk itself would have a huge problem, because it would mean that the whole extent of the city of Mirnograd cuts the already battered highway, the highway that went north of Pokrovsk towards Konstantinovka, the 00532. Once that highway is messed up, it's fucked. Well, the issue is that Pokrovsk itself now it's already a battleground city. It's not that much of a storage and logistical hub. It still remains like that, but right now it has become a battleground city, and there are a lot of things that we do not see in Pokrovsk itself. So basically, one of the things that is going to happen right now is that we are going to see some shots from Mirnograd, from Pokrovsk, where the assets that the Ukrainians are preparing to push forward, notably the Karadak Brigade, notably some of the other retarded brigades that they brought through to try and defend Pokrovsk, are already losing pieces. There was a footage of a BTR-70 blown up. There is another tank within Pokrovsk that got blown up, a couple of maps, stuff like that. But you're going to see that more and more, that the Russians are still busy. Unlike what everybody is trying to portray, the battle for these cities is happening right now. Entering them, the close contact, the CQB, the house-to-house, whatever, is a matter of finishing the city off. The battle itself is the sapping of the strategic assets to defend them, and also the tactical approaches themselves. That's why the Russians, unlike what a lot of people said, who said that the biggest mistake is that the Russians didn't go straight for Pokrovsk, but tried to envelop the whole area. I think it was Andy the pedo that said that. But, I mean, like, the guy is an absolute trash bag. So the Russians have understood that the mistakes that they made initially with Bahmut, although in Soledar they did something quite good. As I said, they spread it, the air around Soledar, and then they broke through, both from the flanks and inside, and then what happened. The mistake they made with Bahmut for a long while, where they tried to enter the city immediately, then they got a bit hosed by the Ukrainians in October 2022, then they did it again in February, March, until the city broke completely down in May. The Russians are not going to do that. As I said, they're going to spread up, open multiple gates to reach the city. There is also the peculiarity of the topographic laying of the city. The city is high with regards to the surroundings, but also it's rather deep. Avdiivka had this advantage for the Russians that once you were in the city itself, the city belt was pretty narrow. The plateau where the city was pretty narrow. So once you cut this plateau, once you were in the city and you cut it, would take roughly 40 days for the Russians to properly do that. The city was lost. The Ukrainians would have to move. In Selidovo, it's not like that. In Selidovo, unfortunately, it's a kind of king of the hill all over the city. So the Russians will have to fight for the city inside. The greatest advantage, though, as I said, and as everybody is saying on both sides, Ukrainian and Russian side, is that the Russians seem to have a pretty good level of accuracy now with the UMPKs, UMPBs, which they showed actually yesterday evening when they hit, either by UMPK or UMPB, a substation in Zaporozhye. The hit was extremely accurate, as we saw, because the lights went out almost right away, but also the way they hit the city with these gliding bombs means that for once, Russians now have a proper mean to isolate Zaporozhye. A lot of people paid attention to what happened yesterday, which is that now the Russians have the possibility to put between 110 and 1,500 kilograms of explosive on a rather large area. So bridges around Zaporozhye, the dam itself, should suckle in fear right now. But the Zaporozhye axis is not very important right now. The Zaporozhye axis is just there to illustrate how far the Russians have come from the beginnings of the UMPK, which was laughed about for bad wells and even extending of wings and shit like that, because that's what is paving the way for what's going on in southern Donetsk. Persistivka, as Andy the Pedo himself recognized, was worked upon with UMPKs for roughly 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, there was nothing in the city anymore. Russians pushed at once, cleared the city. Ukrainians fled as far as Zolotaniva, even behind it, which right now is in danger. Some people say it has been taken. I would like to believe that, but I would refrain until there is a proper geolocation. But the most important part, I already posted the videos of that. The Russians seem to have completely changed their mindset, and in 2024, despite the losses, despite a lot of problems, including the air defense, the plan, the people behind the planning of all these offensives seem to be absolutely. And why? Because they are choosing once again, I'm going to repeat, they are choosing once again to go after tactically and strategically sound situations. What does that mean? The tactically sound situations that unless, there is something that we don't know, they didn't try what they tried the first, second, and third time in Ugledar. They expected that the general strategic situation for a whole area played along with the tactical forces that had amassed for it. If you guys remember, a lot of people shut on Muradov because the plan he had was not bad. Actually, it was pretty good. The issue is that the implementation of the plan was shit because a lot of things were missing. The mining was not done. Preparation for the both pathways that would come, one from Mikirsk, the other from and a lot of other of these things, they never were there. So Muradov tried something. The Marines indeed went as far as occupying the same dachas they're occupying right now, but the other side never came to help them. And the rear of the Ugledar area was completely open. Kurakovo was raining hell on them. But now it's different. The highway is locked. Kurakovo itself is being attacked, with the Russians going to Hostre. It's a completely different strategic environment. And now, of course, it looks a lot easier. And it's the same Russian military that a lot of Ziggers mocked and said that it was worse than Wagner. We go back to what I said more than a year ago. It has nothing to do with one team being smarter than the other, it has also a lot to do with how the general trend and the general layout, strategic, tactical, and so on, is at the moment. A lot of people were like, oh yeah, for the Russians managed after 2 years to understand that flanking works. Yes, after 2 years when they fucking got Avdiivka and they crumbled the whole eastern salient, of course now they can flank. Before that it was not possible. They were 20 kilometers away from the flank, from the highway, the 0542. So once again, judge everything at its right value, not at the face value. And also the recent CBS is completely crazy. Because, like, we also right now like to pile up, especially in the area of Stupochki and Chasovia, to pile up on Pogrozhid. But he did what he could at that moment. Wagner, back in the day for Chasovia, wasn't helped out by the fact that the Russians wanted absolutely the Ukrainians to waste themselves in the counter. So they decided not to go with Pogrozhid's plan and give him the ammo and the shit he wanted extra, of course, because he still had ammo, he still had ammunition, as he showed during the shit show in June 2023. This is a gone conclusion, but now what happens next? Well, basically the Russians have already put the lines on the sand. They will go after Novoukrayinka. They would completely link up from Novoukrayinka towards Zolotaya Niva and probably push east to west towards Velika Novosibirka. They are already pushing south to north over there. It's a bit more complicated. They already take Makarivka. They would probably push way before, go even to Blagodatne within 2 or 3 weeks if the Ukrainian forces in the area seem to completely pull out of the salient, because it would be a very big problem with the Russians coming both from the east to west and south to north. But once again, let's wait for it. That would be my option for the Ukrainians. But as we have seen, sometimes Ukrainians are even more stupid than they look. So maybe they would try and defend themselves over there along the Mokry River. Like for the Russians, that would be a bit complicated, a bit nasty, but a far better outcome, because that would mean you would annihilate the small pocket that would remain there. With them fleeing, of course, it makes it easier because you can recover some ground and reestablish positions, but at the same time, you would let them go with a rather sizable portion of their troops still intact, which, of course, may come to bite you in the ass, exactly what happened to Ukrainians in 2022 when they basically failed to trap enough Russian troops in Kherson. So that's going to be one axis they advance. The second axis we're seeing right now, they are pushing towards Maximilianivka. They are going to attack Kurakivka and Kurakovo soon enough. They are closing the small cauldron that I already think is empty for most part. And then, as I said, they're going to achieve an advance of roughly 400 square kilometers as a minimum, just by leveling the front line in front of Pokrovsk. Once that is done, of course, the biggest, like the elephant in the room will be going after the Pokrovsk-Mirgorod tandem of cities. It's a cluster of roughly 130,000 people. Pre-war, of course. Now it would be roughly 100,000, 105,000. And with the evacuations, probably less than 10,000 people would be present on both sides in Mirgorod and in Pokrovsk. Once Pokrovsk is taken, the biggest problem for everybody would be on the very threat of Russia spilling over from the oblast that it has already annexed. It has declared Russian territory, which is the Donetsk Oblast, Lugansk Oblast, Zaporozhye Oblast, and Kherson. And of course the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, which is Russian de facto and de jure for the Russian Federation, given the referendum that happened there in March 2014. Those are actually the targets laid out, the minimas of this operation by Monkey. So we are here with a very big danger for the Ukrainians of losing a major logistical and threshold target, because the moment these people are fucked, the moment Pokrovsk is taken, as I've already said, the boundary between the Donetsk Oblast and the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast is roughly 15 to 20 kilometers. The spillover from Velika Novosilka and Pokrovsk is huge. That risk is absolutely huge. And losing Pokrovsk before the American elections would be an absolute shit show. Because suddenly you have Russia, and everybody's saying this, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Everybody's saying, like, behind Pokrovsk you have this emptiness. If you've been in my spaces, I already explained that the road network, logistical network behind Pokrovsk becomes a lot wider. You have bigger distances behind it. Therefore, it makes it extremely complicated for the Ukrainians to have a proper shape and a proper defense system. And that's exactly what the Russians want. They want the Ukrainians to themselves buffer out of Donetsk and try and defend as deep as possible in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Probably, as I said, around the Samara waterways. And when it comes to the northeastern Donetsk Oblast, the takeover of Pokrovsk opened the way to go towards Dobropila. But Dobropila actually causes a lot of headaches for the Ukrainians, not as much for the Donetsk Oblast, but because of its proximity with a huge highway that goes from southern Kharkov towards Kharkov city. And also, once you are in Dobropila, you can see Barvinkove. Remember that Barvinkove was the point when the Russians couldn't go further in 2022, which also sealed their utter defeat in the Izium pocket. But now, coming from the south, when you see the topographic aspect of the advance from Dobropila towards Barvinkove, you have a huge problem as a Ukrainian. Because the Russians are going to take the heights just over your face. Once the Russians have those heights, you are going to see a huge limitation of your traffic over 15 to 20 kilometers, which means that part of the highway that goes from the west and south of Kharkov Oblast towards the Kupiansk front is in even greater danger now, because it can be cut in two places. One around the Konstantinovka and the sister cities upstairs, and the other, of course, now in the area of Dobropila. And there you have it. Losing Pokrovsk now, and having the Russians pushing very far from east to west, from the southern Donetsk Oblast towards the northern Zaporizhia Oblast, changes everything. The war is not done. Ukraine hasn't lost yet. But for Putin, his own political and military objectives are very close to be done on that part of the front, of course. The other part remains. For instance, once I think the Donetsk Oblast is near completion, and once they're going to start pushing from south Donetsk towards from North Donetsk towards South Kharkov, then the big issue is going to start for the Ukrainians, because the fight that they had so much success for, which is freeing the second city of the country, Kharkov Oblast mostly was liberated. Now you're going to have the Russians in the worst area of Kharkov Oblast, where they stopped the Russians from going. The Russians were stopped going down south, trying to run amok towards Pavlograd. But now you have the problem that the Russians can choose where they want to go. They can still go towards Zaporizhia and closing the city. Now they have the tools to make the logistical point in Zaporizhia city itself extremely complicated, including they can start bombing the dam. And like, it's almost game over at that moment. Because first of all, the destruction of the dam would deprive the Ukrainians of a huge bunch of electricity energy. It would actually allow the Russians to reflood the Ugledar basin, making it already very difficult, next to impossible task, so basically to cross the current basin by vehicles. Impossible again. But then they would also force the Ukrainians to do a huge detour towards Kamyanka, or straight from the passages over the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, so basically the city itself, to reach the other side of the Dnieper. So a lot of people, it's true, and it's normal. It was a huge shock seeing those arsenals getting destroyed. But the small hint that the Russians gave yesterday to Zaporozhye, which is, hello motherfuckers, we can bomb you now. And before, it could happen as well. Before, it's true that you could have bombed by UMPKs by coming extremely close, you could bomb Zaporozhye. But now, given that in Zaporozhye your biggest targets are 3 bridges and 1 dam, and given that the gliding range of those bombs now seems to have exceeded, even for the classical variant, the 70 kilometers, I pity the fools that would try and defend the city, if the Russians want to get it, of course. Now, Zaporozhye city, as I said, is part of the package, so it's part of the oblast, and there is no way the Russians are going to let it go. But right now, what's happening, as I said, is a consolidation of Donetsk Oblast. Kurakovo is going to be taken. Ugledar is going to be taken. And now we also had a small announcement within the Ukrainian forces, which said that Ukrainians should be prepared to lose Selidovo and probably Mirnograd. I jokingly used the tweet from Masno to say, oh, well, basically there goes the space, because exactly this is what's going to happen now. Tactically speaking, the Russians, it's true, they only need Selidov right now. They don't need to go after Pokrovsk as it is. They don't need to lose their time and lose their people to go after Pokrovsk right away. As I said, the best part would be close the cauldron, extend the passages towards Pokrovsk, start and chip out on Mirnograd, and once Mirnograd is done, which would, I think would take a while unless the Ukrainians do not try to defend it, and they make this hedgehog city within Pokrovsk, but that would be also self-defeating. Then indeed the Russians would have the best bargain they had, and at the same time the whole Kursk fiasco is becoming a worse fiasco day after day. I think that for the end of the year, the Russians should be at least within Pokrovsk. If not, it's not a big problem itself. It's just that it would be, when it comes to the PR situation, a huge hit for them. Because as for many things we've discussed, the Ukrainians love this 1-2 punch, which is a huge PR shot, damaging Russia's reputation abroad, because as we often say at the Timur Criminal, the Russians don't give a fuck anymore. It's gotten beyond any of that thing. The whole point that the Russians care right now is their objectives. They got them, fine. They don't have them, let's get them. So I hear a lot of people complaining and saying, oh, it's a matter of this, matter of that. No. It can be a matter of many more things that you're saying. But at the end, Russians have cynically made a calculus, which is whatever we're gonna get hit with, does it kill us? Yes, no, no. Well, let's just go and do it. So, same thing with these arsenals. Is it going to deprive them from ammunition to pursue their offensives? We're seeing that the inertia, the operational inertia alone, is not stopping and is pushing them forward. So, right now, my vision is that they're going to be all right. They're going to be fine until mid-October. Don't forget that Budanov and friends said that in September, the Russian push would be completely exhausted due to the losses. And I think they were also thinking about the Kursk option that would exhaust the Russians. But as we can see, it's the contrary happening. Ukrainians are throwing Kursk good money after bad money. We're seeing shit that they were given last year, they hadn't shown, but they are showing up now. The ALVB, the M60 bridge layer, suddenly is shown in Kursk because they need absolutely those bridges. We saw the Challenger that was hidden after one was destroyed, another was hit in Zaporozhye last year. Suddenly 3 of them pushed forward. One destroyed again, another badly hit. We saw the huge penetration in the turret, and a third one attacked by a Kamov helicopter. We don't know where that was and where the tank is, but as the Ukrainians pulled a lot of these assets away, unless it was scrap metal like the first one, well, the jury's out on that one. But right away after that happened, now we see them bringing up Leopard 2A6. They lost another 2. CV90s, they lost another 3 or 4. The only thing that is missing right now is that they dropped the 47th on 3rd Azov with Bradleys, and they lose them as well in Pokrovsk. In Kursk. So overall, the strategic gambit that Ukrainians accepted in August is not paying any dividend. Quite the contrary. First of all, they are not doing what the Russians did, still are doing in Kharkov, which is staying put. The Russians are in Kharkov since May the 10th, 2024. So it's May, June, July, August, and now it's going to be September. 5 months. Ukrainians are not there even for 2 months. And they're already having huge problem keeping up with their losses. Of course, the territory they are occupying Kursk Oblast is bigger than one in Kharkov. For many reasons. One of them is that the Russians were surprised and were far more surprised, and also the area around Suja was far less populated and far less defensible, or was left less defensible because the Russians said, oh, they're going to run them up for a while and we're going to stop them, we're going to kick them out. This too is exactly what I told you. It is the Russians making a very cynical calculus. When people say that Ukrainians would trade territory, ground for damage inflicted to the Russians, there is no common measure, no comparison between what the Russians did in Kursk and what's going on right now with Ukrainians, where, as I said, the ground that Ukrainians are losing around Pokrovsk and around Ugledar is pure gold. And the ground that Ukrainians seized in Kursk is literally manure. Less people, less more defensible, a lot less quality as well. All they have is the gasometer in Suja, Suja itself, a couple of bigger villages, and that's it. That's basically it. There is nothing there. Russians, I don't want to make the list, but the last month alone, they captured 5 to 6 over 10,000 cities. One of them was captured in 3 fucking days. Novorodivka was captured in 3 days. Boom. Danziger. That's the difference between both sides. And it's true that Susa was also captured in 5 days. Or a bit more, but doesn't matter, it's short term. But once you put both next to each other, the only angle that you can keep on Kursk right now in order to declare it successful, as I said, is maybe potential green light for Western weapons to strike deep into Russia, and of course this mischievous petty glee by saying, oh, see, I did it to you, I did it. Doesn't matter if then you got completely body slammed, but yeah, I did the thing. This is basically the mentality of the Ukrainian leadership right now. Now, the other problem that we're having, and this is the second part of the space, is that the Ukrainian leadership does not seem fazed at all by Kursk. And I think it's a bluff. There is no plan, or at least the plan that they want to have is something that the West, or especially the Americans, will not allow to happen. Not as much because they are afraid or they're cautious, but simply because it would mean a presence of their troops within Ukraine. From Romania, the only axis that the Western aircraft can use and peruse would be going against Crimea. But that still means that they are over sea while the Russians are going to come over land. In such battles, it's extremely important because mentally, the pilot overflying the sea, if he gets shot down, is going to fucking drown. And also, people to come and get him, it's easier for them to come from Crimea than from Constanza. Therefore, it's a quasi-ensured captivity, if not outright death. That's why the Americans, or whoever might want to have this no-fly zone and going after Russian aircraft, they would rather do that from Poland over Ukraine towards the Russian border, with the risk, of course, of getting intercepted by the Russians over Belarus, through Belarus. So all this tactical aspect of the game makes the Americans extremely cautious. That's why the F-16s right now are not doing anything else but air defense cap. The time would come probably they would be engaged into bombings simply because the resource, the Soviet legacy resource for the Ukrainians is going to run dry, or at least will not be as available as. And we're seeing that they're losing planes, they're losing helicopters, whatever. But generally speaking, Zelensky's plan is simply, in a certain sense, remember initially it was like, I'm very confident that Biden will be positive. And then a couple of days later, a day before going to the US, he said, well, if Biden doesn't approve it, well, we'll have to go with Plan B. The introduction of this potential refusal, even partial, because one of the things that I think that is not going to be any flight zone. Any no-fly zone is not going to happen. For as long as Russia maintains its equilibrium when it comes to the Air Force. And in order to reduce that equilibrium, it would be necessary for the quote-unquote Ukrainians to destroy a large amount of Russian aircraft and Russian airfields that are already outside of the range of the Atacams. When it comes to the long-range missiles like a Storm Shadow, they had them for a while. They tried their luck in Crimea with them against aircraft, and it didn't pan out. If they want a mass destruction, a huge blow, they would have to use their whole fleet of Su-24s, which would give away the attempt itself. That's why right now the best option for Ukraine is low-level flying drones, massing them, as I said, along a certain axis, flaring them when they cross the border so the Russians cannot go after each and every drone, and then focusing back to a single channel to attack the target that was chosen. It remains, unfortunately for the Russians, the cheapest, most efficient, but also the most accessible strategy and tactic for the Ukrainian forces. The Sukhoi and stuff, that's for later. That's for when the Russians would start missing some of their pieces. One of the things that I heard, including by retards, like no one, is that Americans are going to go after the air defenses, the Russian air defenses. Well, that's what they did for a while. Then they stopped simply because the Russians started to do this cat and mouse game, which is just moving them around, being less retarded. And also, the amount of ATACMS that were given was just fini. There was no ATACMS making 3 available to the Ukrainians. On the other side, there is such a Iskander, plucking baobab for the Russians. And that's the difference between, as everybody says, a subject, a vassal, and an object. Russia, it's its own object. If they want, of course there are limitations. There is no infinite resources. Also, although, Russia comes damn close to that. But the reality is that the Russians can still produce them. And that is one of the key points that a lot of people have forgotten in the whole discussion about the depots that were blown off. As I said, in the worst case scenario, Russia's going to focus. In the best case scenario, they're going to start working full tilt to replace what was lost. But also, they're just going to fucking go to North Korea. And if there were North Korean shells missing, well, guys, you're working for us, we're paying you. Can you deliver whatever you have right now? And you're not going to feel any real shortage there. What is going to be different, though, is that now the Russians are going to do something that they didn't do for a while, simply because nothing happened to these depots. They're going to start dispersing and burning the ammunition. And it's true that it might cause some problems given how centralized and how centered around the railroad transfer the Russian logistics is. Now, if Russia does that, then the air defense system itself disappears. That problem that they have when they cannot intercept these drones for a very simple reason, actually, as I said. All these drones, in order to be intercepted, would require a fuck ton of SHORAD, but most importantly, they would require a typical detection system. All these drones fly right now, just like the Shahids used to fly back in the day, between 30 and 50 meters in altitude. Which means that for a lot of radars, they're going to be blipped deep, and then they're going to disappear. Curvature of the Earth, rather absorbing material, ULS paths and air defense gaps mapped by the US. You name it, they're going to be perfectly able to avoid long range and medium range air defenses. When it comes to short range, as I said, the problem with short range is that you need to have a lot of systems around your point defense area. But most of the detection and interception time that you're going to have for these systems is going to be between 100 and 400 meters. Basically, you're going to see them at their very end. Unless, of course, as I said, you have this huge gap between your air defense zone and the incoming drone. But the problem is that if you've seen, most of these drones do a treetop flight in between buildings, including when they hit the Ramenskoye. It is because the altitude is patched up and plotted up to be as little visible on radar as possible. So this guy is going to pop up at, as I say, 400-meter maximum, and your Pantsir, your Tunguska, your Shilka, whatever, is going to have very little time to intercept when it comes to the point defense. What needs to happen, but that's a intelligence issue and also a detection issue, is that when these drones flare up their trajectories to enter Russia, you need to have a passive system at the border that detects them, even very basically, just like infrared camera, whatever. And then either you go the Ukrainian road, which is acoustic detectors in poles, like basically a cell phone in a pole, and that's it. Or because these drones have a specific frequency, then you have to have a huge spectral analyzer 15 kilometers apart at some point, when you're going to see them coming through, putting them into a NAS, and then narrow down their trajectory, which would allow you then to send whatever you want, be that a fucking pickup, a shilka, basically predetermine where they're going to go. Once you know where they're going to go, often you will have over 1 hour for them to arrive. When it's about 600 kilometers of flying time, these things fly at roughly at 150 kilometers per hour. So you have roughly 3 hours until they reach their destination, 4 hours sometimes. Basically, it just comes down to an effort to line up your detection, first and foremost. Because when you see how the planes, these drones, reach their target, you can see that some attempts from the ground with small caliber weapons is attempted. But it just doesn't work. Because, well, you are targeting it with eyeball Mark 1 or Mark 2, and it simply doesn't work. It's not a Baba Yaga. It doesn't fly like 15, 20, 30, 40 kilometers when you basically see it very slowly and close enough. That thing goes still very fast and goes very low, which means that for a lot of people that try to intercept them with their personal weapons, most of the times they're going to miss because it doesn't simply work the way you would try to go after an FPV drone, for instance. So, the issue with the air defense that I just explained here, you got this proactive way to do it, or a more reactive way. As I said, you just start burning your shit, dispersing them, putting them outside the known rail yard connections, and then of course you lower the efficiency of your whole logistical system. But at least you risk less. That's exactly what Ukraine is doing. Ukraine has another, quote, advantage, disadvantage, which is that it receives not enough ammo to stack it in such a huge artillery depot as the Russians. Ukraine might receive 150,000 rounds per side, but it needs that shit ASAP. So basically there is almost nothing. The only thing you're going to blow is maybe 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 rounds. We had that with the attack in Donetsk Oblast, where an Iskander hit at least 2 trains, and one of the trains had roughly 2,200 rounds of ammunition. It was a huge poach, but it was basically 1 day of ammo or 2 days of ammo for the whole area. Great result, but compare that with probably at least 100,000 rounds that might have been blown in Tikoretsk. And then, of course, you got the missiles and other artillery shit that blew into there. It's just a matter of scale. And sometimes the advantage that Russia has into pursuing this war from an attrition perspective are also disadvantages because, you know, they are operating as a quote-unquote proper military with specific bases where you have them outside a civilian area, very visible, completely transparent to Western ISR. So it's actually pretty easy to do something against these. And if, you know, as I said, 100 drones are not going to work, well, you do 200. The cost for these drones is rather limited with the quote-unquote advantage and result they're going to attain. So once again, our biggest problem when it comes to seeing what the Russians are doing is simply to focus on the next step. Okay, you know, that was blew off. We're going to see what remains there. Maybe 30% of the buildings is intact, so potentially 30% of the artillery rounds is still usable, or missiles, whatever it is. But you have to go to the next step. That thing is quote-unquote done. Of course, you're going to see for responsibility, you're going to start punishing people and taking names and shit like that. But the problem right now is that you have a war on your hands. It doesn't mean lack of accountability on whoever fucked up there. It just means you go for the next step. And the next step is pretty simple. Next steps we're seeing right now. We have Selidovo, we have Pokrovsk, we have Ugledar. The war goes on. War continues. And this is one of the things that Ukrainians, unfortunately, have a huge problem understanding. And that's why they complain the most. They say, oh, it seems that it's limitless, the Russians don't stop. That's how it is. That's an attrition war, guys. They were too accustomed to what happened in 2022 when the Russians got a 1-2 in the face and suddenly they recoiled and then it went on the defensive. Right now, it's completely different. Ukrainians may well have done a 1-2 when it comes to logistical aspect, but it's a bit like the scene of the Revenant with DiCaprio when he's actually fighting with the bear. Cool, yeah, you stabbed it once, but that shit's gonna fucking bite the head out of you. That's what Russia is right now when it comes to the Donetsk Oblast. The Russians are focused, they are locked in, and are just completely cleaning out the area. And for a lot of people, as I said, we started the Ugledar pointing roughly end of August because the advance in the area has been huge. Like in 3 weeks, they've taken over 140 square kilometers on a very difficult axis because they didn't start deep enough. They started laterally from Prechestovka towards Zoltaniva, and then they pushed vertically towards Novogradiinka. And this is the biggest difference we've had. And this difference is just not the Russians being better, or, you know, like, as I said, the Russians, as long as it's by the book and everything fits, they are operational geniuses in their own way. But here, it's something else. It's exactly where the attrition war is playing, and something that a lot of people in Ukrainian side refuse to see. And Timur Krylov told them. We told them since the beginning, like, you think you're doing something by destroying 10, 15, 20 tanks. What are you doing? It's just pulling back. The interest now is to see if the Russians are ready for this. If they're ready, if they advance the way we think they're going to advance, the proposal that Zelensky is going to make these days to Brandon is going to be already decrepit, already caduc, already bygone, irrelevant. Because right now the proposal is, oh, I'm betting on Kursk because I want to hurt the Russians. Allow me to strike Russia so I can expand on Kursk and like make the Russians feel bad because I just invaded them. But the reality, and this is the funny part, that's why, as I said, them attacking Tver, so basically going to the other side of Russia, it's an operational good point, but it's also very performative. You have a fucking arsenal in Bryansk, 55 kilometers from the front. You sent a couple of missiles, you failed, because that's a fucking thing. We have them striking the main area of deployment in the base instead of attacking the ammo storage. And nobody's talking about it. We just have one fleeting video from the Russians, but the Ukrainians themselves are not trying to show any result. Most probably because most of the target installations just didn't got hit. If you want a kind of analogy, look at what they're doing right now with Kursk. Today they posted 3 different videos. One of them is with I think the 80th took some prisoners. It's from Fasanovka, so it's day 3 of the invasion. And they showed it today in order to prove, oh no, the country is completely fucking up. Another one when they attack was the attack towards Medvedev. And I posted today that one of the Max Pros that was used to go through was captured like half a day later. They did the push. There is a Russian senator that got hit by one of the optifiber drones. Another tank is burning in the middle of the field when he crossed over the north of Medvedev. So again, Ukrainians right now are so much in a cope mode that this should be the most important part. They should see exactly what they're doing. And they keep showing these Russian attacks towards their positions, but they don't say where it is. They don't want it geolocated, because once you geolocate them, deep state starts to fucking cope. And once again, go to the 1st of September 2024 and compare it with now. And we're going to do it together. So, Pokrovsk area, 1st of September, 729 square kilometers. Cool, no? Then, fast forward today, and we have almost 100 square kilometers of Pokrovsk area. Not bad. It's fine. But then, we add Ugledar. And then we can also add a small extra around Krakovo and so on. And you'll see that this month has been catastrophic for Ukraine compared to any other month. Ugledar, there are 150 square kilometers extra just around Ugledar. We're not going to go to Krakow or whatever. You can then add a couple of things that were taken this month up north. And as I said, you were looking at 300 to 400 square kilometers lost by Ukrainians in the month that was supposed to be the triumph of the Kursk penetration. Kursk itself has gone from quote unquote 1,200 to even deep state now puts them at roughly 800 by also being a big motherfucking corper, because half of the shit on the Karenov axis has been taken back. They know it. This is the best part with deep state and all these motherfuckers. They know it. They know that they have the power to shape the narrative, not for long, of course, because at some point the Russians are going to just pop out with the flags and then are going to shit on their party. But the shaping of this narrative, despite that, Cope State is crying the fuck out. They are literally asking whoever is in the area to do something about it. Because so far, it's going from bad to worse. And as I explained today, your problem The problem that you have when you combine Kursk and the losses in Donetsk Oblast is that what you're showing as Ukraine, and it's true that the narrative is a bit unfortunate because when Ukraine is losing, it's because Russia has all this mass, all this power, and we need to equalize it. And then when Ukraine is winning, it's not that they received all this shit from the West. No, it's the brave and smart Ukrainians that overplaying and overmatching the Russians. This absolute retarded dichotomy, unfortunately, still plays a huge role on the political narrative. You can see everybody saying, oh, we should not think about red lines, we just let the Ukrainians strike. I'm like, I'm the first one to agree with that, just fucking do it. So they can end you. They can end Ukraine. Everybody who wants the war to end abruptly, and I'm not speaking about nukes, I'm speaking about specific things that can be still done pretty fast, and I already hinted to one of them. Zaporozhye now is in fucking mortal danger. It doesn't require Iskanders and shit. It will require 10 Su-34s locked up with 2 Fab 1500 going and smashing whatever bridge they want to smash. And it doesn't matter if out of the 20 bombs that you're going to send, 10 are going to miss. The damage will be done and the logistical transportation route will be severed. Once that is done, you're going to start finding a solution as Ukraine. But also, and this is the most important part, you're going to be scared shitless about the dam, about the hydrocentral. And then you're going to start thinking about, oh shit, how did it happen? And it happened because you wanted to play with the fucking fire and you burned 2 depots. And right now, when it comes to the escalation, the misery that can be inflicted upon Ukrainians, Russia just showed a small card. Like a Queen of Hearts. Okay, just, you have to know that I'm going to fuck off with Zaporizhzhia. Easy. And once again, I want to tell you guys that this is how you should watch this war. I'm not saying you have to be pro-Russian. Actually, I said there's a lot of things that are not right. But when it comes to the danger, how it might develop for the Ukrainians, how much pain they can get, that's your problem. Whatever they've done with those 2 arsenals, and it's very important, I'm saying once again, it's a salient point which shows that either Russians are extremely cynical, either unprepared, and they could be both. Unprepared because cynical. But always count with the reply. Every action has a reaction. And in this case, a lot of people, especially on Twitter, especially retarded NAFOids, think that this is going to go like this without any kind of reply, that the Russians are just going to take it. And with 3 years in this war, when the Russians seem to have been taking it, but then suddenly Ukraine is 30 kilometers back from its front line, and nobody asks the questions how. Or at least the answers that we're hearing mostly is that, oh, Russians are just throwing guys into the mid-ground. I'm like, okay, so basically the Ukrainian army doesn't have a problem with its recruitment, doesn't have a problem with its manpower, and what you hear is, no, they have a problem with manpower. So how was this positive? Don't forget that a lot of Western think tanks and a lot of so-called experts in February pushed for an attrition strategy that would advantage Ukraine. We are now 7 months after that. That was one of the points that I tried to address with the article of Wall Street Journal. I was saying like, oh, in February, the military asked Putin to consider mobilization, and Putin said, no, I don't want it. And based on the context, it was logical. I mean, like, they hadn't been doing so great on Avdiivka. Of course, it was a work in progress. But at that point, it made completely sense for the military to say, okay, you know what? If it's going to go like this for every single city, we're in the shit. Completely legitimate as a question. But then, not even 2 weeks later, it was a completely different aspect. And then the choices that were made are a testament to the fact that Russia reacts. And I know that a lot of people in the group do not like that kind of reaction, this kind of laborious, very dull, grinding match that they are imposing on Ukrainians. A lot of people would like to have some flashy reaction. And sometimes it happens. You get huge airstrike campaigns out of the blue that suddenly beat every single fucking Western air defense system and inflict real damage. But at the end, where it counts the most, it's still the grind. And this is something that a lot of people were holding against me. They say, hey, what does it matter that you're going to kill 10,000 idiots in a trench while Ukrainians are lobbing drones at your rear? I'm like, but the Russians are doing that as well. And every night we see this bullshit from Ukraine by saying, we shot down 20 Shaheeds, 10 cruise missiles. The reality is, when I'm going to go back, it's not only that, but the reality is that a lot of the troubles into looking at the performance of both sides with the rear strikes is that one side is helped in its concealment of losses. We only know that when they cannot hide it. Like the strike in Dobropila that killed 20 guys, including 2 lieutenant colonels and colonels. We couldn't know it if some retard didn't post the obituaries. Same for the F-16 that got shot. If the fucking stupid mayor would have given up the names, we would probably never know it. They got caught in the act. It works both ways like that. Everybody, for instance, is getting crazy about the IS-28 test fail. And I'm like, yeah, what's the matter? If you know how the fucking test procedure for most of these systems goes, it's like, maybe not normal, but it happens. But we wouldn't have known it if we let the Russians deal with it. And the same thing should be happening also for Ukraine. And this is just to inform people. It has nothing to do with, like railing them, whatever, because we mock them quite enough with the situation at the front. We don't need a huge zoom on, for instance, couple of storage sites from the Nova Poshta that were completely cratered last year, where we knew there were ammunition because that thing blew up like it was the 4th or 14th of July, whatever you want to call it. We never had those. We only deducted that something had happened because suddenly the situation in the front went to shit. And also we start seeing obituaries. This guy is dead, this guy is dead. And people put it together. Same with the Kramatorsk attack. Remember the Kramatorsk pizza? Everybody was saying that those guys were civilians. And then once again, we had some footage with the military people inside. And then we started packing up the losses. And suddenly, they're not all civilians at all. Actually, you hit a military assembly, okay? A couple of civilians as well. Collateral damage. So, overall, to close this discussion, once again, I want to tell you guys, just pay attention to what are you consuming as information. Unfortunately, the Zigro side of this war has some extremely, I'm going to call them, optimistic people. But also people who willfully are pushing fakes. I've seen a couple of things by some notorious posters that have nothing to do with the operation at hand. Ukrainians started to push that shitty Kharkov scene of 2 years ago as happening in Kursk. Then Russians pushed that follow-up video from that same area as a proof that Ukrainians had lost tanks in Kursk. Again, that was in Kharkov. And a lot of these people are just doing this willfully. They know perfect. I mean, if they don't know that they have nothing to do with this war, it should be like completely away. But they are pushing these things while knowing perfectly they are doing something that honestly just destroy any kind of faith you might have in them, but also paints us all on the Russian side as retards. And a lot of you guys, I'm sorry to say, maybe not most of you, but a lot of you still bite them and then have to be, recalled by saying, that's not true. I had that literally with the video on Kursk, like a couple of guys, very nice guys, just took them at face value, and we ended up having to explain that, first of all, it was in Ukraine because there was a shitty animal feed brand, but also, well, we found the video as well. So just pay attention to that, and also don't trust anyone, including us, if we don't, give you the receipts. Because this is one of the things that I like, for instance, yesterday, if you remember, I was in this space, and like, there was a person who for a long time has been some kind of passionaria of the Ziegler world, and that whole shit, it was already a lie. Then that person got caught in the lie, then she got caught by being like basically a felon. And that person still goes around throwing clout about the fact that she has 300,000 followers. And all that shit is based on lies, guys. It's based on copium that person sold for so long. And once again, one of the things I will never be able to forgive all that group of people is when they tampered with documents that our guy currently serving jail time, Twerk Shaker, pushed out there just to prove that he had the info. And these people were so butthurt by reality. I'm not saying that was the truth. It's just, it was real. The document was real. They didn't need to change it. Because the moment they changed it, they completely destroyed the potential rebuttal of that. I'm talking about the losses that were revealed roughly around April 2023 with their leaked documents. Very quickly, once the real documents were out from Bellingcat, which followed the trail out of those retarded motherfuckers that had a bullshit with Rivar yesterday, most of the people would know, then they slowly got back and found Mr. Teixeira, and now the guy is in jail. Butthurt people, willfully lying, got someone else in trouble. My whole point here is that whatever you see and it doesn't fit your narrative, and often teamwork criminal doesn't fit the normal Ziegler narrative, then just leave it. It's not for you. You don't need to shoehorn a circle into a triangle. It doesn't work like that. You're just going to lose your credibility, but you're also going to lose touch with reality. People that, like the group that I'm targeting right now, they still selling bullshit to this day. And this is the most important part that Ziggers need to have in mind. War is shit. It's going to be painful. You're going to have people grafting from it. You're going to have people stealing from it. You're going to have all kinds of shit show. And unfortunately, ex-Soviet, ex-communist countries will have a huge part of corruption with these systems. And even Western systems will have a fuck ton of corruption in procurement, in testing, in everything. That's what a military-industrial complex does. It literally steals money from the state. Of course, it gives a product, but most of the time this product is over-engineered, over-expensive for what it really is. You can see the almost immediate impact that wartime production had on Russia. The average price of every single item, and a lot of people are going to say that, oh, it's an economy of scale thing. It's not true. It is not true. You cannot have a divide by 3 on your price while you're producing like 20 times the amount. It doesn't work like that. Yes, you can have maybe 20 or 30%, but the price now for Iskanders is 1/3 of what it was when they tried to actually procure it for the Ministry of Defense. We're not speaking export. Export is normal. You're going to make money. We're speaking about the very low ratio of profit that they were supposed to make by procuring that to Russia. Now we see that, and we cannot even say that the ruble, got stronger. Ruble actually got weaker generally against the euro or the dollar over time. But now we have it for just under 1 million euros, one Iskander. It used to be 2.7. And not for export, because export was 6 point something, was for the Russians. So once again, this is just an example to say, you guys, like, don't forget a lot of things. This war has revealed things that a lot of us that were following the Russian military knew more or less. Although the scale of it has been dramatic in certain aspects, not everything. But at the same time, like, you have to accept it. I had a discussion with a guy who even adorns our logo as his fucking call name, Timor Criminal 2022. I'm like, and he's like, Shoigu didn't do anything wrong. He's not. No, bro, no. That's the thing. You need to accept something. These guys, they're not nice guys. They're not nice guys because you are pro-Russia. They have their own agenda. They have a lot of interest. And there is a lot of fucking money that passed through their hands. So of course it's schemed. Everybody does it. And once again, this is not, like to shame the Russians or whatever. Just to tell you guys, do not try to manipulate facts because you don't like them. And trust me, at some point I tried to just, overlook at them for a long time in 2022. By saying, oh, it's normal. Yeah, they're going to be fuck-ups, but they're going to turn this around. It never happened. They turned it around where they're starting to think the way I would think about this war. When it comes to manpower, when it comes to a way to advance, when it comes to how to protect your flanks and everything. What they tried initially, which was literally a textbook deep battle, didn't work because a lot of things had changed from textbooks. And I thought for like 1 or 2 months that no, it's going to come around, it's going to come around. And then I admitted that it's not going to come around because they fucked up. And once I admitted that, a lot of things were a lot easier to accept, and also you could see clear how things would evolve. So once again, it has nothing to do about shaming you or whatever. It's in a certain sense even an admittal of my own mistakes initially. But just to say, when you see something is real, just don't hide from it. Embrace it, because then you're going to understand a lot of things that come after it. For instance, destruction of the depots. Big fuck up, fine. But let's see what happens. Where 3 days after the offensive is not stopped, the Ukrainians are fucking squealing that things are going bad. And then you start understanding, okay, it's unfortunate, but actually it also shows that the Russians have enough shit to go on for a lot longer than the Ukrainians. And therefore, then you start to understand that, okay, this thing is on. And also you start stacking up what has been said by one side and what the other side does. Ukrainians keep saying that the Russians are going to be exhausted in September. You have only 7 days, 8 days in September remaining with today. Unless something dramatic happens, so like every single depot gets destroyed, the Russian offensive is going to keep going for at least another month. So the Ukrainians are going to keep getting dick for another month. And that's the best part here. That's the best part. Every single thing that has been said by the Ukrainians the last 15 months has been just bullshit, and they're getting to pay for that. They didn't make their own mea culpa, they didn't analyze their problem and admitted it, and then they are paying for that. And a lot of people say, yeah, but they know, but actually they have this public relations speech, but internally they know. If they knew, they would do something about that. They wouldn't go for Kursk. And I know a lot of people are going to say, because I said it myself, they have admitted that we're going to lose the Donbass. So let's do something else at the cheaper cost. But Kursk is not cheaper anymore. So once again, we go back to the essence of this space, is that at Ugledar, you got a symptom. You do not have a goal. You got a symptom of what's going wrong and what's going to happen in the future. And the Ukrainians, some Ukrainian channels said them itself, like, prepare for a lot worse losses. And I'm going to end with this, guys. Prepare for a lot of better news in the upcoming weeks. Probably some more discouraging, like probably another round of deep strikes. But by October, then the Russian deep strikes themselves are going to start. And this time they have a lot more flexibility than last year or the year before. Thank you very much, guys. If you want to add anything, feel free. Otherwise, well, we are mostly done. Okay, Damon, I see that. Yeah, I see you, man. I'm gonna add you. Go on, man. Damon, it's you. It's on you. You can go on. Oh shit, he disconnected. Okay, G, it's up to you. Up to you, man. Yeah, here you come. Ah, fine.
Yesterday. Why? So was that space hosted by the Liquid guy or whatever his name is?
Yes, yes, Pete Liquid, yes.
So were you the guest speaker, or did you come in later? Because I was.
No, I'm gonna. I have never hidden who I am. I'm never gonna hide myself. No, I jumped there because I saw that no one was talking shit about a lot of stuff, and a lot of people told him that he's just doing the same thing over and over again. Putting his hand in the sand and pretending that he knows better than anyone else. And when he needs to get more technical and start describing things, he just doesn't do it, and he uses stuff that has no sense. For instance, even Kaiser yesterday told him that using the Euro Parliament resolutions is literally retarded because those guys have zero power. The only thing that they do is just basically waste paper and just make noise. What's important, as I said, is the European Commission and the member states, individual member states, and their unanimous vote or not. So that was it. I just tried to have a discussion over that because I felt that everybody was a bit coping, and then a lot of people are still with this idea that Trump's going to save the world, and I'm the first to say. And we had this discussion with people who have a different view on him, and I completely agree. Trump is a maverick, he's a wild card, but it doesn't mean that wild card is going to do something good when it comes to ending the war. What Trump says during the campaign and what he does after it are two different things. And this is true for every politician, So that was a bit, difficult, but I didn't really react on that. What I reacted upon is that a lot of people are seeing this war as some kind of cartoon, and are not just even checking the intricacies of, everyday logistics, everyday losses. One of the things I'm going to tell you guys, because I wanted to do that at the end of the month, but if you start checking properly, Ukraine has never lost so many artillery assets, even by Oryx themselves. Like, they're at over 220 artillery losses by, Oryx count. But if you like start to compile it properly and check every single strike, especially if you use lost armor, you're gonna see that there are over 260 in about 8.5 months. And this is the biggest difference, because for the whole war they were at roughly 22 systems a month, so a little bit less than one a month lost, or 6 per week, 4 point something per week. But this year there are over 30. They have lost one artillery system, self-propelled, towed gun, multiple rocket launch system. One per day, each and every day they lose at least one. This acceleration of losses is also visible with the tanks, especially visible with the mobility protected vehicles. So, like, you can see that Ukraine is losing a lot more by also being absolutely in the defense all the year long. For now 9 months at the end of September, Ukraine would have never been on the offense. They lost the initiative in October last year, and they never regained it. And the only time when Ukraine was fully in defense were roughly 4 months, from March to July, early August 2022. Anything after that has been, like a tango, with 3 to 4 months for one side and 3 to 4 months for the other side. But since October 2023, the Russians seized the initiative, and then they're not letting go. And it's there you need to check how much Ukraine has learned. For instance, yesterday the question was, is Ukraine a better army now or not? And I literally started to explain by a lot of small details and analysis that it wasn't. Ukraine, despite receiving a lot of things to become more lethal, is losing more equipment than it lost when it was completely outgunned in 2022.
And I think they were better during the counteroffensive, honestly.
Yeah, that's what everybody thinks. But the reality, when you see how they performed, and you start analyzing the losses, you see that, okay, maybe there is a reason for that, and that reason is basically because they're still on this hybrid system, half Soviet, half Western, and the Western system that have been given to them are hodgepodge. They need to have a huge workload of different parts to make them run, and then it's very, as I said yesterday, wheel-based. Wheel-based solutions for Ukrainians are far more numerous than tracked. And then this, changes also the tactical mobility for every single system, because some units are going to have tracks and they're going to have, be able to operate far deeper, far longer, and others are going to be wheeled. And we can see that in Kursk, the moment you're going to have Rasputitsa, the moment the soft is going to be going a lot softer, the soil is going to be a lot softer, you can start forgetting about a lot of MRAPs, a lot of 15-ton MRAPs. Because their ground pressure is going to be worse, their engines are going to be worse, they're huge as barns, so it's going to be a lot easier to pick them off. So, all these small details make it extremely, easy to start analyzing and showing trends when it comes strictly to the tactical aspect. But that, for instance, in that space was completely overlooked. One of the things that a lot of people give us, a bit of heat for, they call us war autists, Team War Criminal. But it's not that much war autists, it's just seeing how things going to operate on the ground. It's very good to say, I'm going to build this house, but if you don't know how the house is built, you're going to fuck up. And these small details, most of the persons who make the analysis, you can see on both sides, pro-NATO, Ukrop, pro-Ziger, Team War Criminal. And I think this is what sets us apart as a group when it comes to War Criminal. We decided to go as deep as possible, and the military aspect is just one part of it. We got guys that are looking at the expenses, at the cost, at the loans that Ukrainians have to reimburse. We look at the mobilization. One of the things that we've done since the beginning is looking how much these guys have been mobilizing since the day one of the war, and how much the pool is there to be. And if you check what we said since the beginning, if you were there, you would know that our determination, our estimates were a lot closer, if not straight up what we said, like roughly the 5.5 maximum people that could, take in for the military since the beginning. When you see how many people also upgraded their Reservist Plus app now for the armed forces of Ukraine, you see that the amount is more or less what we said. What is new, and this is one thing that suddenly people like Tatarigami for the people who don't know why you mock them like that, those guys now are slowly coming to our, far more deeper analysis when we, posted back during the counter that wasting storm shadows in bridges 130 kilometers deep in Crimea was not going to change anything. Everybody laughed at us. I also posted what Tatarigami posted to mock me about that. Oh, bridge is fine. Well, bridge was fine after a couple of days, and nothing happened. Ukraine didn't walk over the Russians up to Crimea, quite the contrary. So once again, what I want to say with this is that what I felt that was going on, but that's a lot of space like that, is that people do not seem to understand what they're saying. I'm not saying that we know the future and we're going to tell you how it's going to work and how Russia's going to win this war. But from what we're seeing, from what we're reading, we're trying to make this whole opinion, which for one or the other reason seem to be more or less accurate. And that's it. That's why I was there. And also I have a personal animosity towards no one, because he's a gaslighter, a sociopath, and a narcissistic asshole. But that's something else. I've never hidden that. So, yeah, it's out there. So, yeah.
Okay. I just have two more questions then.
Go on, man.
So the first one is with the glide bombs hitting Zaporozhye. Like, how do you think they increased the range? Because I heard it's like 50 kilometers, 60 kilometers. So it was like Zaporozhye 70 to 75 kilometers? Or how'd they do that?
One of the things that I have managed to do is pretty straightforward, which is increasing the surface, actually resistance surface of the bomb itself. So the wings, the expanding wings that had before were shorter, which made that the portents of the airfoil, basically didn't, arrest the bomb on its glide long enough to, go across a longer distance. So basically, if you want, the surface, the resistance surface of the bomb itself was too narrow, therefore the dive rate would be greater. Now, if you augment the wings, the air resistance is going to be, when it goes down, of course, towards the ground, it's going to be bigger, so it's going to fly, quote unquote, this glide longer. But this also requires the bombs to be released from higher, which means also there was a risk that existed already before, but now it's a lot less, given that they can launch them from 20, 30 kilometers further away. They can also fly a lot higher, because that, it makes it very difficult for any kind of air defense system to reach them, given that, as you can see, as we saw actually, the Su-34 can avoid, if given the heads up on time, a Patriot missile from roughly 80 to 90 kilometers without much of a hassle. So in this case, they got the lesson. They augmented the gliding surface, and that's it. That's very straightforward. However, they had already done something a lot better, which was using UMPBs. And UMPBs, of course, the system is fully integrated, so basically the wings are part of the bomb itself. It's not an external kit. And there, they just played with the weight and the winged surface. Bomb is lighter, the winged surface is bigger, wingspan is bigger, so the resistance area is also more important, so it can fly already way longer. The problem is that you sacrifice a lot of payload. UMPB 250 has a roughly between 110 and 90 kilograms. They say 97 kilograms of explosives. So it's still big, it's still a huge bomb, but it's not for instance, UMPK 500, which has a 227 kilogram explosive filling, plus a huge casing that goes around and, flies over 200 meters and gets you anyhow. So that's it. Mostly that's how it is.
All right. The last question is about this losses thing you brought up multiple times. Like, the guy getting arrested. Is that just like somebody had a document, they posted it, and then it got traced back to them and they got arrested?
No, but actually you can follow the case, because Lord TWK is pretty much a known case. What happened is that he was an airman in, I think, the Massachusetts National Guard or something like that, and he had this Discord fucking channel where he was bragging about knowing shit. Nobody would believe him. So one day he decided to literally screen grab or grab documents from work, which were for eyes only, and he literally posted them to prove that he had a point. And these documents were being passed on Telegram on different channels, including from a pro-Chinese channel at some point, and a lot of ziggers had them, but they weren't showing them up. And suddenly we have the DD crew who get their hand on these documents, and one of them they don't like at all, and those documents are the losses, the so-called losses, as deducted via Mediazona, for instance, and Oryx. So the Pentagon was using Oryx as a measure of, attrition, and they were using the Mediazona count, which back in the day was roughly like 17,000, but Mediazona was saying that up to 70,000 of the losses are not, found because, well, we don't have this and that. And the Pentagon went straight up and said, okay, between 17,000 and 43,000, Russians are dead, and I think it was like 100,000 something wounded. And I was like, I recognized immediately where they found the database, but it didn't make sense for, the DD crew to time out. And they were saying, like, how the fuck do the Russians have so little losses and Ukrainians so much? And this comes from, quote unquote, the Pentagon, Because for the Americans, since the beginning, it doesn't matter who has lost more or less. Their, their psalm, their, gospel is Russians are losing 2-3 times more than Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians are having more wounded but killed a lot less. So it made no sense for the Pentagon to start saying that suddenly Russians have 1/10 of the casualties or 1/3 of the casualties from Ukraine. That was literally a Ziegler point for so long, when a lot of guys were completely out of their mind and saying that in 2023 there were like 400,000 Ukrainians dead. And I was like, what the fuck? And by pushing this bullshit, Bellingcat comes over and starts a whole, investigation. Back into this investigation, you got the New York Times, you got the Washington Post, and they found out that because of, I think it was a countertop, that it might be someone from the Air Force, and then they, they mix everything, and they found out that it's Jack Teixeira. And this dude, who was unwillingly sourced for the Russian military, although, it wasn't that important, just to point out how bad, sometimes being self-deceiving yourself is. This guy who could have, kept going like this for maybe a couple of more weeks or months, got caught because some dumb bitch wasn't happy about a document that by any chance wouldn't be true itself. It was an internal document of what people thought, and based on a count that back then was already problematic. So this is literally, trying to manipulate history, trying to manipulate facts, and just failing atrociously. And the person itself is a failure. I mean, like, I don't want to keep vomiting on that person, but I'm disgusted, especially the way that person was yesterday. Absolutely no class. I myself lost it as well. I'm not going to try to pretend that I was clean, but that person has no class, and it's literally, she showed herself by being a pure grifter and a poison for the Ziegler side. But, it's up to you guys. I don't really fucking care. If you want to follow that person, it's up to you. I just laid out a kind of warning about you just following a phony, and she was, because she was pretending for so long to be from Donbass bullshit, and we found out she was to me, I think she was a glowy. She's a glowy. That's it.
Thanks, dude.
No
Glad
problem.
you stayed around for years. I've followed you for a long time.
Thank you, man. Thank you, man. Okay, I don't know what happened, but we lost Z. Z, it's up to you, man.
Hello?
Yeah, man, go on.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the attrition aspects of the war. So we know that the Ukrainian war is mainly of attrition, but we also know that the most fortified positions were in the hands of the Ukraine, right?
Yes.
And this played the role in the proportions of attrition between Russia and the Ukraine. Now that Russia is about to get these most fortified positions, the roles will be switched, right? So basically, then
the attrition should go down. Yes, it should become worse for Ukraine. But don't forget two things. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Okay.
The attrition has to be looked both on, absolute numbers. So how many Russians lost, how many Ukrainians lost, but also on proportional numbers. Because one of the biggest problems Ukraine has right now is that proportionally it cannot face the Russians. But this was a given it was a small population. They are under attack. They cannot produce as much as the Russians. You need a clean ecosystem, and you need your rear to be rather untouched and so on. But the problem with Ukrainians, if you want to see how attrition is playing against them, once they get out of their defensive position, their fortified position, look no further than the Avdiivka and Pokrovsk area. I made a whole thread to more or less illustrate how bad it went. The moment they were out of the Avdiivka, the moment they were out of their protected logistical routes, they got routed. It's as simple as that, because they didn't have a contiguous defense line, they didn't have protected positions, and the moment the Russians could apply their aerial attacks to UMPKs, Lancet, all that stuff, suddenly they started to get attrited to a point that when the first Russian assault wouldn't work, the second would. When the second wouldn't, the third would. But before that, if you check Avdiivka, and I literally pointed out that so people could know, Russians earned 27 square kilometers in 4 months. And for a lot of people, that was like, oh my god, this shit is failing. And once it broke down, you had the whole domino effect, which is, unfortunately for Ukrainians right now, accelerating, and it's accelerating because their leadership is a bunch of morons. And they have put everything on the line by sucking to the USA. And that's it. It's as simple as this. Their defense system, the defense logic, is literally the Kursk Hail Mary and hoping that the Americans would not let them fall. Because a lot of people have said, if the front moves too fast, if there's a general collapse, we're going to intervene. But what if the Russians do not want to collapse it generally? What if the Russians are just going this attritional warfare when they're going to take a month to take 300 square kilometers, and they're going to bomb everything in their way? What then? Because you can see that in Pokrovsk, it's still very slow. It's just 10 months, 11 months, 30 something, 35, 40 kilometers. That means 4 kilometers per month. It's nothing, It's you cannot even perceive it. But the people who get bombed and get killed, they perceive it. And then they start looking to the whole front line, and then you see the situation getting extremely complicated. And that's why a lot of Ukrainians who are not Zelensky, especially in the military, saying like, we're going towards a catastrophe, not because it's ready to blow, but because the trend is going against us. When Kursk happened, there was a thread by Jonathan Lokeson that I posted. I'm going to repost it again. He literally took the words out of our group and, produced them for NAFO and pro-Western people. And there is nothing else to say. These people saw the trend, they saw the writing on the wall, and they went for a gambit. The gambit is backfiring, and they're hoping that out of that gambit, they're going to have some kind of cavalry going back and saving them in Ukraine. And the whole plan that Zelensky is going to prepare, but he doesn't want to tell anyone about, unless, in cryptic form, is exactly that. It's literally Zelensky saying, guys, it's super good. I want a no-fly zone. I want troops on the ground on the other side of the Dnieper so you can intervene in case of. And I want a full lot of artillery. I want my SRBM program to be expedited by you. I want a cruise missile program to be expedited by you. So basically what Ukraine wants is to have all its shit paid and done by Europe while they basically put people on the line and get them killed. That's basically Zelensky's plan. Zelensky's plan is, West's going to produce for me, I'm going to get these, equip my guys and send them to get killed. But if you don't want to do that, then you have to attack Russia. That's what he's trying to say, trying to do. And you're going to see, because this thing is going to blow up now that he's in the US. But the more he says about it, the more it looks, as we said, that his only chance is for intervention, in a way or another. So, yeah.
Okay, and what you are saying is that Russia will go slow just to to cook it slowly without having the US
because
intervene.
if it moves too fast, then you enter into an area where you might expect intervention. And I don't think that any of the sides want that. The Americans want Russia to pay a price for what they're doing, but they don't want to start having a war with Russia. And the Russians want to actually finish the whole Ukraine story as it is right now. Maybe it's going to restart in 10, 15 years. We don't know. But right now, the Russians want, first and foremost, to get rid of the whole war part. Of course, in their terms. I'm not going to say that they're going to sign anything. And then they're going to take advantage of whatever concession they're going to get to make peace, to start to re-equip, reinvest in the areas that have control. Because one of the things that we are seeing is that Russia is demolishing a lot of real estate in these urban battles, and that needs to be changed. It needs to be rebuilt for the part that Russia is going to invest into. For instance, Mariupol is being rebuilt with flaws, but still, they're doing it. A city like Bakhmut, Artyomovsk needs to be rebuilt. It's going to be a frontline city, but it needs to be rebuilt. Avdiivka needs to be rebuilt. When Pokrovsk is going to be taken over, they need to rebuild, or at least be sure that there is life in there, So for Russia, there is still a booty that they need to reshape and reintegrate in their own territory, because that's one of the things that a lot of Europeans don't seem to understand. The oblasts that Russia has annexed are not bargaining chips. The only bargaining chips you're going to have is mostly extra ground like Kharkov, or if they push to Dnipropetrovsk. So yeah, that's it.
One last question is to where what would be Russia's aim for the current pace, like the final aim? Is it the full Donetsk Oblast and the current Zaporozhye line, or what exactly?
I
So what
think the
will be the
Foroblast
frontier?
plus, I think Foroblast plus a small part of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, so it can act as at least a bargain chip, and part of Kharkov Oblast. Now, this depends on how Ukraine is going to quote-unquote behave. If Ukrainians keep going the pace they have been going right now, then it's going to be a problem. Because, Russia is working like this. The first peace initiative was rather tame, pretty bad for Russia, because it didn't even conserve Donbass. And for Ukraine, for Crimea, it was a very specific system which was meant to, legitimize Russia's rule, but it would still have taken a kind of a referendum, which in my opinion is completely crazy. That thing didn't work, and then the proposal that Putin made in June this year, he said, like, guys, it's super simple, you have two choices, and one of those choices is getting creamed militarily, or accepting that we're going to start the peace negotiations by, admitting that the four oblasts are ours, so basically the reality on the ground. And that, of course, Ukraine was never going to accept. So the more the Ukrainians try to fight back and the Russians advance, the more the risk is there that Russia simply says, you know what, fuck you, we're keeping also Dnipropetrovsk. As easy as that. Don't forget, the biggest problem that Ukraine has right now is that despite all the chit-chat and all this bullshit, it has no kind of initiative anywhere. And despite the bullshit about the Black Sea, the only thing they can do is interdiction. They do not have a navy to impose themselves. They cannot do amphibious operations of any scale. Most of them are going to end up in tears, like it happened multiple times on the Spitsky, Kursk, Tenderovsky. They can do some sabotage bullshit like they are doing with the rigs at the coast of Crimea. But other than that, we haven't entered that phase when Russia, as I said, fixes its Donbass problem, and then they can turn around and maybe try to solve the other problem that it has, which is that Ukraine still has a coast. I think if the war doesn't stop in 2025 or early 2026, we are going to see a completely different approach from the Russian side, which would be making sure that Ukraine understands that it's not going to have a coast later on. And that, given how Russia is orienting itself with its logistics, might very well include a unrestricted warfare phase. Unrestricted naval warfare would mean that no boat is going to go towards Ukraine. They will have to do something in the Danube port of Reni, around Ismail, but that would hurt Ukraine enormously. And if Russia is prepared to have a different type of logistical route, so maybe go through the Caspian or start cabotaging around the Turkish and Georgian coasts, that could be something as well. But of course, the biggest issue is that for Russia and its ships to cross the Bosphorus, if they start a unrestricted naval warfare phase, then they're going to get basically choke pointed there. The same thing for Ukraine, by the way, because the Bosphorus is a choke point. So that's it. Yeah, General, it's up to you, man.
Hello, everybody. I was listening. I just want to point out regarding the retaliation that you said that Russia might choose to do now. We can go back to what George Herbert Bush said in Iraq when he said, "I don't want to proceed further because then I'll have to own it." And
Exactly.
I think the Russian, let me say, confined reaction, if we can say so, it's just based on that, because I see them looking forward to own it one day, and as you said, there's a lot to reconstruct. So not adding much more to that thing. Another consideration regarding the south is that when we see Russians going back and holding the Snake Island, maybe the tide has been turned. Then,
Yeah, for Black Sea, I agree, but Snake Island is a suicide mission itself.
but maybe this time they plan it better.
Yeah, maybe.
The question I wanted to ask is, everybody saying that if they pass and they stabilize the front around Pokrovsk, Kurakovo, and the rest, they might attempt an incursion to block the Ukrainian troops that are south in Zaporizhia, to cut them. Would it be viable, and in your opinion, what kind of forces would be
You mean
needed?
by going from Ugledar west?
Yeah, toward the river.
Yeah, the thing is I mean, between a couple of spaces, you know already that's how what the Russians want to do, which is narrowing the Zaporozhye front in order to make it impossible for the Ukrainians to be able to react. Because even now they have roughly 127 kilometers of extension over Zaporozhye, and a part is in Donetsk Oblast. But if you advance from east to west from Ugledar, you take Velika Novoselka, and then you join next to Robotine, then they are only dealing with 80 kilometers of front. And once they're like that, they're going to have the same problem that the Russians had initially during the Zapo counter, where they lost lots of artillery to HIMARS, because the backyard wasn't big enough. But then, I mean, like I already explained, the biggest issue with Zaporozhye there is that you have only three main, areas of highway lanes, so to speak. So basically, you're going to have few big roads to use to go fast, and all there is going to be, shitty back roads. And we've seen that's what hampers both sides the most, not being able to have something useful fast, where they can, bypass. This is one of the things that happened with Kretstoka from Ugledar. They had 10, 12 kilometers of highway completely free. It just took the city after bombardment, of course, and then it was done. And this is, I think, what really is the biggest risk for Ukraine, is losing control of the main highway. And even if they try to stop the Russians, if the Russians start passing and filtering through, the Ukrainians themselves automatically going to start trying to pull back. So, for instance, they're going to completely leave places like Orikhiv, Uryapol, and so on, and they're going to be 20 kilometers back. This means that suddenly the Russian artillery, smash and stuff like that, can advance further. Helicopters can advance further. Planes can advance further. So you have exactly what Ukrainians wanted to do to the Russians last year, happening to them this.
Radius expansion of strike.
Exactly. I mean, you're the artillery guy, so I cannot lie to you. But I think that's what the Russians are going to do. And once this expansion happens, and given that they already have some tools to isolate Zaporizhia city, if everything happens at the same time, suddenly Zaporizhia is some kind of huge, of course, very large, but boiler. And then
probably hitting the bridges and confining them to the river, and Okay. And another thing, that this is more funny, like if we compare it to our homeland, now that they are taking control of many mines, and then there was that Ugledar champagne factory, whatever, in the caves, maybe they found a solution?
For their storage, yes. They had already done that. Like, the two salt mines in Ugledar were already occupied. I mean, one of them was a field hospital, which I found a bit weird, but, whatever. And then the cellars downstairs are already ammunition depots.
Because they are hitting sector depots in Russia most. We didn't hear recently that they hit something.
No, only mine was, but it was a small depot. It was a battalion level depot in mine. So, like 12,000 rounds were lost.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Just to get into the discussion.
No problem, and you're welcome.
Bye.
So yeah, guys, thank you very much for being here. If anybody wants one extra, you want to intervene, it's fine. Otherwise, yeah, it will be it. And I would like to apologize for the format because there were some personal thoughts in there, and I usually don't like sharing that, especially when it's about dissing someone. But yeah, thank you very much for being here, and hopefully see you next time. And yeah, have fun. Watch out what's going to come. As I told you, Ukrainians themselves seem to have given up on a couple of cave cities like Selidovo, Ugledar, of course, and they are smelling the blood in the water for Pokrovsk. So yeah, let's see what happens. Have a nice day, and to the next time. Bye bye.